Okay, so there's this word we hear constantly, almost, instinctively. But maybe its true weight, its complexity kind of gets lost. What really comes to your mind when you hear casualties? Is it just one image or is it broader? Today, we're doing a deep dive into that exact word, casualties.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how often people just equate it with, well, deaths. But that's a really common misconception. As we unpack this today, you'll see it's actually much more nuanced, much more profound, really.
Exactly. So our mission here is to, unpack that true definition. Look at how it's used in different ways, its implications,
Yeah.
which are surprisingly broad. Think of this as like your shortcut to getting really well informed on a term that maybe defines human impact more than any other.
Ah,
Okay, let's unpack this then. If it's not just deaths, what is a casualty really
hmm.
at its core?
Right. Good question. So fundamentally, a casualty is a person who is lost to a unit or maybe a system. And that loss could be through death, yes, but also injury, illness, capture, or even being missing in action. You hear it a lot in military contexts, obviously, but also medical, emergency response, disasters.
Mhm.
The key is that idea of being lost to the system, rendered unavailable, essentially.
Uh-huh. I think that's the thing. When you hear casualty figures like on the news, your mind just jumps straight to fatalities.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is it's a much wider spectrum. It captures a lot more human impact than just deaths.
Precisely. Yes. Fatalities are, of course, a huge part of it, a critical part. But casualties also covers the wounded, those missing in action, MIA, people who are captured or detained, prisoners of war, for instance. And increasingly, we're recognizing those with significant psychological effects, PTSD, things like that. Each one of those is a real loss, not just for the person, but for their unit, their family, society.
Okay, so let's break those down a bit more. What do those different categories really look like? Because the details there really highlight the bigger picture, don't they?
Absolutely. So, fatality, that's fairly straightforward. Death due to violence, accident, illness, whatever the cause in context. Then wounded, this is huge. It covers everything from, minor injuries to critical life-altering ones, things that can lead to permanent disability. Missing is, well, it's when you just don't know someone's status. They could be killed, captured, maybe just lost in the chaos. The uncertainty is part of it. Captured means detained by an opposing force. POWs are the classic example. And then there's this other important category, non-combat casualties. These are losses from illness, accidents, even self-harm or psychological trauma that aren't a direct result of fighting. These aren't footnotes. They can be a massive, often hidden part of the total toll.
Yeah, that distinction, especially non-combat, that really shifts things. So how does using this wider definition change how we understand casualties in really different situations?
Hmm.
Where should we start? Maybe warfare, since that's where we hear it most.
Good place to start. Yeah, in warfare, the term is used very meticulously. They distinguish between military casualties and civilian casualties. For military casualties, the tracking is incredibly detailed. It's not just for stats, it feeds into operational planning, affects morale, everything. And these break down further into combat losses, direct results of enemy action, like gunfire, shelling,
Yeah.
and non combat losses. This can be disease, accidents, friendly fire, even environmental factors like extreme cold or heat. Sometimes these non combat losses are actually higher.
Right. And then the other side, civilian casualties. That's always so devastating and often controversial, that whole collateral damage framing. How does our broader definition apply there?
Well, it expands the impact significantly. It's not just direct deaths from bombs or bullets. It includes injuries from things left behind, like landmines or unexploded bombs, long-term effects from chemical weapons, or even things like mass starvation or disease outbreaks caused because war forced people from their homes. The true human cost is just immense and often way beyond those initial fatality reports.
It's staggering when you think about the scale with this broader view. Like World War II, over 70 million casualties. Now, about 40 million were civilian deaths, which is horrific enough. But then add in the millions more wounded, displaced, psychologically scarred, it paints a completely different picture of the war's real cost. Or Vietnam, maybe 1.3 million military casualties, but 2 million civilian. And Iraq, from 2003 to 2011, estimates very wildly, right? Something like 200,000 to 500,000 total casualties. That range itself shows how hard it is to track everything, especially the non-fatal impacts.
Exactly. And it's not just about war. This broad definition is absolutely critical when we look at disasters and pandemics, too. Think about natural disasters, earthquakes, floods, hurricanes. They don't just kill people, they leave behind thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, wounded, missing, homeless. Those are all casualties. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, for example, around 230,000 casualties. That number includes far, far more than just the people who died immediately.
And global health crises.
Yeah.
They really hammer home this idea of casualties beyond death, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Look at COVID-19. Yes, tragically, over 7 million deaths globally by 2025. But think about the hundreds of millions who got sick. Many with long-term effects, long COVID, organ damage, chronic fatigue. Those are absolutely casualties under this broader definition. They represent a loss of health, function, productivity. Or the Ebola outbreak a few years back. Over 11,000 deaths, yes, but tens of thousands more were affected, many with lasting health problems.
Wow. It makes the term casualties feel almost medical,
Mm.
active, which I guess leads us straight into how this plays out in high-pressure medical and emergency situations.
That's exactly right. That's where we talk about mass casualty incidents, or MCIs. These are events where the number of injured people just completely swamps the local medical system's ability to cope. You know, a terror attack, a big industrial fire, a train crash. In those moments, managing casualties isn't just about treating one person. It's about using limited resources to save the most lives possible.
And that's where triage comes in, right?
Yeah.
That seems like a direct, real-world application of understanding these different casualty levels.
Triage is absolutely critical. It's basically a rapid sorting system to classify casualties by how urgently they need medical help. You generally have categories like immediate, the red tag patients, life-threatening injuries needing help now. Then delayed, yellow tag, serious injuries, but not immediately fatal, they can wait a bit. Minor, green tag, the walking wounded who can wait longer. And sadly, expectant black tag. These are individuals unlikely to survive even with care or who are already deceased. This system forces incredibly tough decisions, but it's designed to maximize survival when resources are stretched thin.
Yeah, it really brings it home. This isn't just some abstract definition. It's about life and death choices, resource allocation in a crisis.
And reporting all these categories accurately is just profoundly important. It's not just about record keeping. It informs strategic decisions, directs humanitarian aid, shapes public opinion, influences international law, even affects peace talks.
But getting those numbers right, especially with this wider definition, it must be incredibly challenging. What are the biggest roadblocks?
Oh, the challenges are huge. First, there's simple underreporting, especially in chaotic places, conflict zones, remote areas where access is tough. Then you have the problem of propaganda and misinformation. Numbers get deliberately inflated or downplayed for political reasons. Censorship happens. And finally, just the sheer difficulty of verification. How do you confirm someone is missing versus captured versus dead in the middle of a war or after a massive earthquake? It takes enormous effort to get reliable data.
So understanding casualties in this nuanced way, it must have serious legal and ethical dimensions too.
Absolutely. International agreements like the Geneva Conventions are built around this. They protect non-combatants, mandate humane treatment for the wounded and captured. These aren't suggestions, they're law. Deliberately targeting civilians or hospitals, that's a war crime, directly linked to causing unlawful casualties. And you see this reflected in modern military thinking, too. There's a growing emphasis on casualty avoidance. It's become a key ethical principle trying to minimize harm and not just win.
Which brings us to something often invisible but incredibly damaging. The psychological side. Psychological casualties. It's a vital part of this broader definition, reminding us that not all wounds bleed. Right.
Exactly. We're talking about things like post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, severe depression, anxiety directly linked to the event. There's also a concept called moral injury. This is, well, it's a deep psychological wound from witnessing or doing things that violate your core moral beliefs. Recognizing these invisible wounds as actual casualties has been a huge shift. It's changing military healthcare, disaster response, public health policy.
It's really something how one word can stretch to cover such a vast, often hidden human cost. And it's interesting how our understanding itself has evolved over time.
It really has. The word casualty itself, it comes from Latin, casualis, meaning by chance or accidental.
Okay.
It came into English way back in the 15th century, but its specific military use to cover this whole range of losses, dead, wounded, missing, captured, that really took hold in the 18th and 19th centuries. It shows a growing awareness of war's diverse impacts.
So just to sum up, casualties is so much more than just a synonym for deaths. It's broad, it's nuanced, it captures the really profound and varied human cost of conflict, accidents, disasters. The definition goes way beyond fatalities. It includes physical wounds, emotional trauma, logistical impacts. the whole picture.
And understanding that, accounting for all types of casualties, it isn't just about numbers. It's crucial for getting history right, for making informed policy, for ethical decisions, for effective aid. Ultimately, it's about grasping the full human reality of these crises.
So thinking about this deeper definition, what new questions does it raise for you about how we measure the real cost of war or disasters or even something like a pandemic? And how might seeing casualties this way actually change how we approach preventing these things or how we respond and help people recover afterwards? Something to think about.